Welcome to the Road to Carving. My name is Paul Lorenz, and in this video we're going to take your skiing from a basic skidded parallel turn all the way through to carving. I'm going to talk about the new movements that are needed and why they're so important. I'm going to share with you a simple progression that will help develop these skills, and also talk about some tactics that will make the whole process easier. So we're going to focus on three main movements in this video: edging, balance on the outside ski, and also what we do during the transition. So edging is really about moving certain body parts to the inside of the turn to increase the edge angle of the skis and ultimately gain more grip. While that's happening, so that we don't fall inside, we need to talk about how we maintain balance on the outside ski. And the transition, we want to move more directly across the skis so that we can engage the edges as early as possible in the new turn. So the progression, or the stepping stones we're going to use, will take us first from skidding to gripping. Now, in this part of the progression, we're really going to focus on getting a bit more grip and feeling comfortable going a little bit faster. That's sort of the stepping stone to then moving on to slicing, which is where we lock the skis on the edge so that there's no twisting or turning or skidding, and we use the side cut of the ski really to turn. Once we're at that performance, then we can move on to carving, which is increasing the edge angle so that the ski bends into a tighter radius. So let's get started. The goal for the gripping performance is to increase edge angle so the ski is travelling more forwards than sideways. The skis are not cleanly cutting into the snow at this stage. Instead, we're aiming for more grip than when we were skidding, so we're using this as a stepping stone to the next performance, which will be slicing. At this stage, while gripping, the skis are still actively turned, so there is still the ability to control speed. However, the increased grip should give you the confidence to start going faster. So let's first look at the edging movements that are required. To increase the edge angle, certain parts of the body need to move to the inside of the turn. Firstly, we're going to look at the foot and how to pronate the foot so it tips onto the arch and creates an appropriate point of balance. Pronation will also determine whether femoral rotation will create an edging movement with the knee or a twisting movement of the leg, which will result in the ski twisting. Then we're going to look at how the knee moves to the inside to create knee angulation. And finally, how the hip moves to the inside. While this is happening, we need to maintain balance on the outside ski, and we do this by creating hip angulation. Start by placing your pole on the inside of your downhill leg. Make sure that the point is next to the arch of your foot and the pole runs up the inside of your knee. We're going to start with foot pronation, so put your hand on your knee to hold it still. The task is to bend the pole by pressing the upper part of the boot against the pole. You will need to tip your foot inside the boot to do this. To pronate the foot, there are quite a few muscles involved. However, I feel the most muscle engagement in two places. The muscles on the top of my foot to lift the little toes, and the muscle that runs up the outside of the lower leg to lift the outside of the foot. There will be slight movement of the knee inwards because pronation cannot happen without internal femoral rotation. But let's try to focus on the muscles I just described to pronate the downhill foot first without too much movement of the knee. Before moving on, let's try to pronate the outside foot while skiing to get a little bit more grip. This will be easier for you to achieve at the end of the turn, so really focus on pronating the foot through this part of the turn now. It would be a good idea to spend a day or two just focusing on this. As you become more confident, try pronating the outside foot to get grip earlier and earlier in the turn. Now we're going to try the same stationary pole exercise with focus on the knee. Try to turn your knee inwards to bend the pole as much as possible. There are a lot of muscles responsible for this, but I mainly focus on the adductor muscle group. These muscles both internally rotate and adduct the femur, which moves the knee inwards and creates knee angulation. It's critical that this movement is combined with the foot pronation that we talked about earlier. If you only focus on movements with the upper leg to create knee angulation, then the torque created through the upper leg will transmit down through the lower leg and to the foot, which will create a twisting effect. As we move towards carving, we want to reduce the twisting effect and increase the edging movements. Now, we've been focusing on the downhill or outside ski because that's where we should be balanced. But ultimately, we want both skis to edge the same amount so that they grip the same amount. So let's try this now with both poles and both legs. I won't go into as much detail here, but I focus on lifting the arch of my uphill foot and using the glutes on the uphill side of my body to abduct the knee and bend the pole. Now that you have felt which muscles are responsible for tipping the feet and knees, try it without the poles. A good cue is to try to keep the same distance between the feet and the knees at all times. Okay, time to get moving. Our goal is to try this in a traverse across the hill. The movements are exactly the same. I want you to get the feeling of the skis skidding sideways and then using the movements that I've talked about to increase the edge angle until the skis feel like they're locking on the rails or cutting into the snow and leaving two sliced lines. The purpose of this is so that you can feel the extremes, from the skis having no edge angle and skidding, all the way through to the skis having a lot of edge angle and cutting into the snow. It's important that you recognise how the ski will travel with each increment of edge angle. It's very important that you have enough flex in your ankles, knees and hips to perform these movements. If you're standing tall, your range of motion will be reduced. This can also lead to movements with the shoulders, hips or whole body towards the inside, which will make it difficult to balance. If you have the opportunity for somebody to video you, then watch your shoulders and hips and make sure the movements come from only the ankles and knees. So we've tried increasing the edge across the hill. So now let's try it in a J-turn. Start down the hill. Once you've turned your skis across, use your feet and knees to roll the skis on edge in exactly the same way you did before in the traverse. It's important to understand that there are different increments of edge angle required depending on your speed and the terrain. So it's important that when practicing this edging exercise, you understand that it's not just on or off, and you increase the edge angle progressively and move through your full range to become familiar with it. Once you feel comfortable with this, try linking the J-turns so that you don't come to a complete stop between each turn. It's very common when you do this to feel like you're falling to the inside, particularly as you increase to the higher edge angles. This can feel like your inside leg is tensing to take your weight, or as extreme as falling to the inside and the outside foot coming off the snow. So to combat this, we're going to use a simple swords exercise. Holding the poles like swords, extend the pole tips out to the side and make sure that both tips remain dragging in the snow at all times. This will prevent any movement from your body and force you to use your ankles and knees to tip the skis on the edge. It will also encourage you to maintain a flexed position, which will assist you with these movements. So let's go for a normal ski now and try to put this into our normal skiing. When you're linking your turns, rather than trying to lock the skis on the edge like we did in the exercise, just try to increase the edge angle until you have as much grip as possible while still being able to turn the skis so that you have some speed control. In the exercise, we were only increasing the edge at the end of the turn when we were going across the hill. Now that you're linking turns, and as you feel more comfortable, try to start increasing the edge as early in the turn as possible. So if we were to put edge angle on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 would be no edge, and 10 would be the skis locked on the edge and slicing. Try to increase your edge through the range from 1 to 9 progressively through each turn. As your confidence grows, try to increase your speed and the gradient of the terrain. As it gets steeper and you go faster, you'll need more edge angle. So let's start to talk about how to use the hips now. Moving your hips and centre of mass to the inside not only increases the edge angle, but also allows you to balance and resist against the centripetal force which pushes against the base of your skis from the snow. The hips are a difficult one because as you move the hips in, it displaces your centre of mass to the inside and does affect your balance. Most people, when they start using the hip joint, end up moving in too quickly or too far and then fall onto the inside ski. So it's important that when you're working on your edging, you maximise the edge angle created from your feet and knees before you start moving to the inside of the turn with the hips. Let's use a simple stepping exercise to get the feeling of increasing the edge angle with your hips. Start across the hill and try to sidestep up the hill. Firstly, roll the feet and knees as we've practiced to get grip, and then move towards the hill to take a step. The act of taking a step will cause the hip to move inwards towards the snow and increase your edge angle further. It's very important that you use the ankle and knee first to establish grip. If you just start using your hip, you may not have enough grip to form a platform to step from, and the ski will slip. Okay, now let's try this moving. You can do this in a traverse first, or if you feel more comfortable, you can do this between the turns as you're moving across the hill. It's important when you do this that you keep your hips and shoulders as level as possible. If you lift your outside or downhill hip and shoulder, that can cause you to fall inside during the turn. So keep them level so that you can maintain balance on the outside or downhill ski as you take the step. Lifting the uphill or inside hip and shoulder to lift the inside ski will be a good cue to keep the hips and shoulders level. Let's practice this in regular turns now. Ski with the intention of taking a step so that the hip moves to the inside, but don't actually take the step. It's important when you do this that you don't lose connection or balance on the outside or downhill ski. It's now time to put it all together. Let's go for a ski and try to increase the edge as much as possible, progressively throughout the turns, starting with the feet, then the knees, and finally the hips. Mastering these new edging skills will take quite some time and lots of practice. These are not tick box exercises or progressions where you do the task once or twice, or for a day or two, and then you have it and move on. You need to spend a lot of time to attain this level of skiing. To progress from skidding to gripping can take anywhere from several weeks to several seasons of practice, depending on your ability, your fitness, and the amount of time you have on snow. Test yourself on different slopes and at different speeds. As I've already said, the faster you go or the steeper the slope, the more edge angle will be required. The radius of the turn will determine how quickly you have to tip the skis on the edge. So for short turns, you'll have to make these movements in a shorter period of time, however still in a progressive manner. A good way to see if you're gripping is by the track left by the outside ski. If you're gripping successfully, the track should be fairly narrow and consistently narrow all the way through the turn. A good guide is that the track left by the outside ski is less than 10 centimeters in width. If it's wider than that, it means the skis are being twisted and skidding and there is not enough edge angle. You might also see that it's wider in some parts of the turn than others. Most skiers twist their skis before edging. If you're doing this, then the track left by the outside ski will be wider at the start of the turn and will get narrower through the turn. This means you need to slow the twisting down and increase the edge angle through these parts of the turn. It's also important that you progressively increase the edge through the turn to maintain that narrow 10cm track. If you're finding that with this increased edge angle it's harder to control your speed, this usually comes down to turn shape. When you're skidding, the skis are slowing down because they're travelling sideways. When you're gripping, the skis are travelling in a more forward direction, so there is less speed control. To control speed, you need to think about the turn shape and ensure that you continue turning across and even back up the hill at the end of each turn until your speed is appropriate to start the new turn. This is often a crucial step that is missed by those progressing to advanced skiing. The goal for the slicing performance is to immediately tip the skis until they are locked on the edges and slicing in the snow. There is no skidding or drifting or displacement sideways, and the skis travel completely forward at all times. There is very little to no speed control with this performance. When you put the skis on the edge, they bend into an arc, and travelling forward on this arc is how the skis turn. The movements required to edge the skis with the ankles, knees and hips are exactly the same as when you were gripping. However, the slicing performance demands a lot more edge angle. In this part of the progression, we will be focusing on tactics and cues to help with this and achieve the slicing performance. We will also look at what happens in the transition, so that the skis are immediately on enough edge angle to slice when you initiate each turn. Learning this performance is much easier on a slalom or short radius narrow ski. So let's get started. We need to feel comfortable balancing on the skis when they are locked on the edges, and also comfortable with the skis accelerating. So let's start across the hill, trying some single uphill turns. Now this may seem similar to the exercise we did when we were gripping. However, in this exercise, the focus is not to traverse and increase and decrease edge angle, it's to hold the maximum edge angle possible so that the skis slice and you practice balancing on a ski that is arcing back up the hill. If you do this correctly, you should leave two very thin, cleanly cut lines in the snow. Try doing this in a wider stance than you would normally stand. The wider your stance, the easier it will be to lock the skis on the edges. Because if your feet are wider than hip width, you will naturally be on the inside edge of both skis. This means the movements made with the outside leg to achieve edge lock will be less than if your skis are hip width. This will make slicing more achievable on these first few attempts. The wider stance will also provide a training wheel, so that you can move your hip in a little more at this speed and feel comfortable that your inside leg will be there to catch you if you fall inside. However, the main focus right now to achieve slicing with the outside ski should really be the foot and knee movements as we learnt when gripping. As you feel comfortable with this, start with your ski tips pointing more and more down the hill. This will increase the speed, but try really hard not to turn or twist the skis. Just focus on staying balanced and making sure there is enough edge angle to slice and arc back up the hill. Patience is the real key here. Instead of starting down the hill now, let's start at a diagonal so we incorporate more of the turn. So it looks more like a C than a J turn. Make sure it's very flat, like a bunny slope, because you will start accelerating very quickly. This is now more brain training than it is physical training. Your natural tendency will be to twist or turn the skis so they point down the hill. Instead, focus on tipping the uphill or new outside foot and knee, and move the hip in so that the ski slices, which results in the ski arcing and turning you. For now, to make it easier, let's just focus on slicing with the outside ski. If the inside ski turns, that's okay, but we want the outside ski to lock on the edge and turn you on an arc. The sensation under your outside ski should be very clean and silent. There should be no scraping or chatter like you may have felt when you were gripping. Before moving on, you need to be very confident with this, without the feeling like you need to twist or turn to slow down. This can take many days or even weeks to feel comfortable doing. For some people, this might be the point where they plateau and it's hard to progress on from here. Okay, let's try linking these turns. Find the flattest, most open run in your resort and let's give this a go. Again, notice the very, very wide stance, which will put you on the inside edges, meaning that the movements you make to lock the outside ski on the edge will be less. Keep the wide stance the whole time. It's important that between the turns, you fight the temptation to twist the skis and really focus on your uphill, which will become your new outside foot. Think about rolling from your pinky toe all the way across to the arch of your foot without any direction change of the ski. You can try this rolling movement with your foot at home or with ski boots off, using the same movement and muscles that we talked about in the gripping section of this video. This is where you'll really start to notice the speed now because there's no slowing down. The main goal in this exercise is to slice just with the outside ski. If you find it hard, make sure it's very flat and just start with 1 or 2 turns at a time. Practice this until you are confident slicing the outside ski at all times before moving on. Again, this can take weeks or even months. The purpose of edge rolls is to now practice rolling both skis so that both skis change edges and slice. Edge rolls also allow you to practice changing edges quickly, which is what's required during the transition of a carved turn. Now I know these look like turns, but I want you to think more about going straight down the hill and balancing on one set of edges and then the other set of edges. As a result of being on the edge, the skis will start to change direction, but your main focus is going straight and balancing on one side and then the other. When you go to change edge, you're now really going to focus on the new inside ski, which we haven't done before. This is the foot that will become the inside foot in the new turn. During the transition, it's the downhill foot. So let's just practice rolling the inside foot on its own with the skis off. To supinate the foot, there are quite a few muscles involved, but I mainly feel it in 2 areas. I feel muscle engagement in the front of the lower leg, and also feel it in the muscles that run through the arch and heel and up the back of my leg, because I'm really trying to lift the arch of my foot. This supination is accompanied by abduction of the knee. There are lots of muscles that are responsible for abduction of the leg, but I mainly feel it in the outside of the butt cheek or glutes and down the outside of the leg. Okay, now let's try it with both feet simultaneously. It's important that the amount and the speed that you edge is consistent between both feet and both knees. Otherwise, the skis won't change edge at the same time and they might start tracking in different directions. It's very important that when you're doing an edge roll, or during the transition, that your feet are hip width. This means that the center of the knee is directly above the center of the ankle and foot. If your feet are wider than hip width, then you will have to abduct both knees just to glide with the skis flat. This means that you will have already used a lot of abduction, and when you go to edge or change edges, the leg that is abducting will have less range and will therefore not create as much edge angle as the leg that is adducting. Also, when standing in a neutral position without abduction, both skis will be on the inside edge. So now let's try this on a really flat cat track. So we're not trying to turn the skis at all. Focus on the supination of the new inside foot and abduction of the new inside knee to instigate the edge change. I personally focus on rolling the inside foot first, even though the edges should change at the same time. Once you've balanced on one set of edges, roll the feet to balance on the other set of edges, so you're continually changing edge. A good cue to do this correctly is to make sure the distance between your feet and knees stay the same at all times. If they get wider or narrower, that will mean the skis will be on different edge angles, which will cause the skis to track away from each other or towards each other. Often when people do this for the first time, they fall to the inside because they are leaning with their shoulders or hips rather than using their feet and knees. To perfect the edge roll, it takes thousands of turns, so I practice this whenever I'm on a cat track or on a bunny slope or access trail. You can also challenge yourself by trying to roll from edge to edge as quickly as possible. Obviously this means that the skis are not on the edge for very long, so they will hardly arc in a new direction. You'll basically be going straight. When you feel comfortable with this, it's time to move on. So now we're going to try to lengthen the arc so that they look a little bit more like turns. The movements will be the same as the edge roll, but instead of changing edges frequently, you'll have patience between the edge changes so that the skis spend more time on the edge and travel on a longer arc. Keep your focus on the feet and knees at this point, and remember to do this on incredibly flat terrain, as there is little to no speed control. As you get faster, you might start to feel the snow push against the base of your skis. This is called centripetal force, and that's the force that pushes on you to change your direction of travel. Centripetal force gives you the feeling of centrifugal force, which pulls you to the outside of the turn. That's what most people refer to as feeling pressure during the turn. An easy way to remember this is centripetal force with the P pushes against the base of your skis. Centrifugal force with the F is the one that you feel. When you start to feel these forces during a turn, try to balance against the centripetal force through the outside foot. So try to make the outside foot as heavy as possible and the inside foot as light as possible. Okay, let's have a look at the hips now, and also how we balance on the outside ski properly using angulation. Now that we're going a bit faster, we want to move the hips in so that we increase edge angle. We also want to use angulation so that we remain balanced on the outside ski. So let's try this simple exercise for both. Place your inside or uphill hand on your inside or uphill glute or butt cheek. Now try to move your hips towards the mountain and use your hand to lift the uphill side of the pelvis. The movement of the hips towards the mountain or inside of the turn will increase the edge angle. Lifting the inside butt cheek will keep the hips level and prevent the hips from inclining and putting you on the inside ski. So this helps with the angulation side of things. With the outside straight arm, try to reach as far forward towards the front of the outside or downhill ski. This will increase flexion in your hip, and combined with the level hip will bring your balance or weight more towards the outside or downhill ski, which is the purpose of angulation. Okay, let's try this moving. Try this first in one turn to get the idea of which hand goes where. As you feel comfortable, then you can link these turns down the hill to practice. You need to make sure you're bending forward to increase flexion in the hip, and not sideways. Bending forward keeps the spine in a neutral position, which is safe and able to deal with any load that is placed on it during a turn. Bending sideways curves the spine and places it in a weak position. If you hit a bump or experience incredible load, This curved position will require a lot more muscular effort to maintain integrity and also risks damaging the spine. As you feel comfortable moving the hips further to the inside of the turn to increase edge angle, we can now start to look at how to transition more effectively. We're going to look at a carved transition because it will better illustrate the movements that we're going to learn in this type of transition. Now that we're increasing edge angles by moving further inside the turn, we will need to move more directly across our skis during the transition so that we don't delay the initiation of the following turn. As an intermediate skier, you may have learned to come up during the transition, and that's okay. As an intermediate, we're not using as much edge angle. However, now with this high edge angle, we need to move from further on one side of the skis to further on the other side of the skis. The up is what causes the delay, so we need to move more directly across the skis. So you'll see here at maximum edge angle, the inside leg is very short to allow maximum movement of the hips towards the inside of the arc. The outside leg is very long so that it can deal with centripetal force pushing the skier in the new direction. It is also resisting the feeling of centrifugal force pulling the skier out of the turn. Currently, the skier is balanced against centripetal force because the outside foot is directly between the centripetal force and the skier's centre of mass. While the skier is properly balanced against centripetal force and has the leg strength to resist it, the centrifugal force will not win and pull the skier out of the turn. If the skier wants to start to transition, they will need to unbalance themselves against centripetal force so that centrifugal force wins and pulls the skier across the skis and into the new turn. There are a few different ways to do this, but we are going to focus on two things. Pressing on the short inside leg will start to raise the centre of mass and unbalance the skier against centripetal force, which will start the transition. At this point, you will need to soften or shorten the old outside long leg, otherwise it will force the centre of mass to rise into a high position, which will mean it will take longer to cross the skis and get onto the new edges. While the centre of mass is crossing the skis and in this lower position, this is where you really need to focus on the edge rolling movements we learnt earlier. As we change edges with our feet and knees, we need to allow the centre of mass to continue travelling across the skis so that the hips can move inside the new turn and increase edge angle. Okay, so let's try this with our skis off to get the feeling. You'll need a wider doorway or hallway for this. Start in a wide stance so that there's a more obvious difference in leg length. This is important. Press on the short leg until the hip starts to move away from the wall. We're standing still, so there are no forces at play, so you won't feel centrifugal force pulling you across the skis like you will when you're skiing, but this will give you an understanding of what movements to make when you transition. As you feel your hips come off the wall, start to shorten or flex the longer leg. This will prevent unnecessary rising of the centre of mass as you extend the shorter leg to cross the feet. Repeat this until you feel comfortable with the timing of the lengthening of one leg and the shortening of the other leg. It will obviously happen a lot quicker when you're skiing, but it will also be assisted by centrifugal force. As you practice, focus on the rolling of the feet as we learnt earlier in the edge roll. Also, try to keep the hip level as it moves between the walls. This will help with the angulation as you move into the turn. The timing is very important. Shortening the leg too soon or too quickly will cause you to get smaller or backseat and may crumble under the load. Lengthening the leg too quickly or too much without shortening will force you to rise up into a tall position, which will again delay the edge change. The goal when carving is to manipulate the size of the turn by bending the ski. Bending the ski is done by increasing the edge angle throughout the turn. The higher the edge angle, the more the ski can bend into a tighter radius arc. The radius built into the ski design will still play a part. However, you are not solely relying on the radius of the ski to turn. You are determining the radius of the turn through edge angle and bending of the ski. Increasing the edge angle requires more inclination. That is moving further to the inside of the turn with your hips, knees and ankles. While doing this, you still need to maintain balance through the outside foot against centripetal force and also an even more direct transition so that the skis commence increasing edge angle in the new turn without delay. While slicing and carving may look similar, there is considerably more edge angle when carving. The radius of a carved turn is tighter, so there are elements of speed control which are absent when slicing. Carved turns also generate more centripetal force due to the increased edge angle. This can create acceleration out of the turn if done correctly. How much a ski bends is a direct result of edge angle. A lot of people think that it's all about pressure and how hard you push on the ski. As you can see here, no matter how hard you push down on the ski, it won't bend anymore because the ground is in the way. In this example, you'll notice that when you put the ski on the edge, the tip and tail remain on the ground and the middle lifts off due to the side cut of the ski. Simply balancing on the ski with your body weight will cause the ski to bend until the middle of the ski is touching the ground and the ski is bent into an arc. It's the ski travelling forwards on this arc that creates the turning effect. If you tip the ski on a higher edge angle, there is now slightly less tip and tail touching the ground and an even bigger gap underneath the middle. Just like before, if you balance on the ski so that your foot is directly between centripetal force and your centre of mass, the ski will again bend into an arc, but this time the radius of the arc will be much tighter. While bending a ski does require your balance or body weight, it is the increase in edge angle that tightens the radius of the arc, and not pressing or pushing harder on the ski. The difference between slicing and carving is that when you're slicing, you increase the edge angle enough so that the ski slices and you ride that radius arc. This is determined completely by the shape of the ski. When you're carving, you are tightening the arc by increasing the edge angle and allowing the ski to bend more. To increase edge angle, inclination is required. There are two things you really need to focus on for this. One is feeling comfortable moving the hips further to the inside of the turn, and the second is shortening the inside leg further to allow the hips to drop down closer to the snow. To do this, I'd like to refer you to Legacy Part 2 in the video library. This video solely focuses on the carving performance. Specifically, I'd like you to watch my presentation on the hand drags exercise, because this provides a clear description of how to incline and why this is so important when carving. I'd also like you to watch the Handy J's exercise. This specifically focuses on the shortening of the inside leg and levelling of the hips. There are many other points that are also discussed in this video, such as the effects of equipment, foot placement while turning, angulation, your balance points, and many other concepts that will directly affect your ability to carve. Thank you for watching The Road to Carving. I really hope you got something out of this video, whether you're an intermediate skier looking to progress or a ski instructor looking to learn new ways to teach these movements. I hope that it's inspired you to get out there and continue improving your carving and your movements for carving. I want to reiterate that this is not a fast process. For many of us, we've spent our whole lives trying to perfect these movements and are still working on improving them. This video that you've watched, even though it seems like you've learnt to carve in 45 minutes, it will take many people most of their lives to get from the skidded performance all the way through to carving. And this is a resource that you can refer to for the rest of your skiing career. I also want to say that it's not the only way to carve. There are many other ways that you can learn to do this and many other exercises and progressions you can use. This is one way, and I hope that it's helped you in some way. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I hope to see you out on the slopes practicing, and I hope to ski with you at some stage soon. Thank you.